How's it going, Grady Nation? Chris Thomas here. Hope you're having a great day kind of day. And my guest on this installment of Grady Nation is Scott Heric. Scott is the co-founder of Unionly, a platform that attempts to simplify the collection of online payments for labor unions. To learn more, check out unionly.io, unionly.io. Scott, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me. How's life treating you?
I am doing very well, and I'm happy to be talking with you because this is a very interesting concept. But before we get to the nuts and bolts of Unionly, you worked at companies like the legal services marketplace, Avo, and Snap Advance, a fundraising platform in higher education. So, can you talk about your career trajectory? Because I'm curious
Yeah,
how those experiences shaped your thought process about the Unionly concept.
yeah, absolutely. Again, going back before that, so I graduated from Washington State University in 2008. And the economy was in a phenomenal place, and no one could get a job. So out of college, I got a job at a company called Big Fish Games, doing customer support. If anyone is not familiar with Big Fish Games, it's an online casual games company. It's about a $3 price point at the time, and the average demographic was men and women 70 and over. And I did phone customer support because they paid a few dollars more an hour. And so I got to talk to people from all over the country and kind of get exposed to, mass customer service in the very casual game space. After that, went to Avo, where the growth we saw there over the course of 7 years. When I started there, there was about 30 of us, and the time I left, there was about 500 people in the company. Ultimately, by the end of that, we were overseeing about 20,000 clients that were in the advertising space. So I got to learn about the advertising space, the online marketplace for legal, just kind of an inventory-based system, transactional system in that regard. And then taking that towards the end of that, it just kind of reached its run. And a friend of mine who started a company called SnapRaise approached me, and two of the founders there said, "Hey, we've kind of got this collegiate side going, and we'd like your help to really get it going even more." So I said, "All right, cool, let's do it." So I went over there, and when I started there, there was 4 or 5 of us, and we had, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 clients, and over the course of 2 to 3 years, became the largest online fundraising platform in the collegiate space. We had a couple hundred clients, quadrupled the team. Our big specialty and thing we focused on was called Giving Day, where we built out these really intricate, complex, high-end custom giving websites where we have campaigns that would raise anywhere from 500,000 to 23, $24 million in a single day. But as a result of that, it was kind of like seeing the high-end, ultra custom, ultra expensive side of things, and I was like, hey, we should think of something that's more simplified, a little faster. And at that time, a family friend of mine, this is about 4 years ago, introduced me to the owner of a company called Unions America. Their main product is Union Active, and he said, "Hey, I've been working with him on this deal, and he'd like to meet you and talk to you about how you could integrate this kind of technology in the organized labor space." So I said, "Okay." So we got on a call and we're talking, and he said, "Hey, I have a few thousand clients, and this is something that is desperately needed." And so I started looking into it and said, "Oh wow, this is crazy. This is a major need." And so I started working on it for a few years. Got told no, probably I don't know, 1 to 200 times by the company at that time. Kept working on it. Our company then, Snap Advance, got acquired in January of 2020. Then that I pitched this idea for what is now Unionly to the new company. They didn't like it. I kept working on it. So overall, I worked on it for about 3-ish years. Obviously, March 2020 hits, the world ends, everyone gets laid off, myself included. I felt sorry for myself for about 15 minutes, and then got back to it. And I called a friend of mine who built the prior platform we worked at, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he and I got together the next day and got to work. So connected with the owner of Unions America and said, "Hey, do you still want our help if we do this?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely." So we got to work, and then in April 1st, we filed for formation. And on April 20th, 2020, we received our official formation papers, which was a complete accident, but it's that's how it happened.
That's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, yeah, so I mean, it's interesting where we've been around for almost or going on 2 years now, but I've been working on the concept in the ins and outs for close to 4 years. So, and it was already kind of a pre-made concept, pre-made business, if you will, and so it wasn't like I just started from scratch. It's something I'd worked on for a long time, but really it was kind of seeing from everything I'd learned from the transactional game space to the advertising space, and then seeing kind of the that juxtaposed with high end, ultra custom, ultra expensive, ultra intricate giving sites to say, hey, we need to make something that's really much more simplified and easy to use, and then also for an audience and industry that really is deserving of the help. Right there, I also noticed there's not a lot of technology out there that's built specifically for unions, and so I said, hey, let's do what we can to help.
Now, how exactly does Unionly work? Because some people might at first assume it's a tool for simply collecting member union dues online, but it actually offers a lot more than that in terms of things like fundraisers and
Mhm.
event sponsorships.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So at a base level, it what we've done is taken the 10 or so parts that you need to either build or pay to have built to create an online payment network and put it into a one-stop shop. So before it might cost tens of thousands of dollars and ultra intricate development and engineering needs, but really at its core, if you sign in and you connect the bank account you want money to go to, you can have an entire online payment network set up in about 10-15 minutes. And from that, once that core is set up, you can use it for custom payments around dues, uh, fundraising, donations. A big part of this was to create an alternative to the leading fundraising platforms out there that people might associate with just the default ones out there, which there tends to be a lot of fraud on. So we've used it for that. If a member is ever hurt or a member is in need, or unfortunately, if someone dies in the line of duty, we were able to help out and at no cost. And they know it goes directly to the family or the organization. We've also built an online store to be able to, really engage with members. The big thing we've seen a big push in over the last 6 months or so that I think has been pretty cool and actually led to an increase in overall membership for our clients is basically creating a digital format for the new member application. Before it was, they'd fill out download a PDF or have it mailed to them, fill it out, mail it back. Then they'd have another form mailed to them. They would send that back with a check. That would be mailed back to the office. All in all, it would take a lot of hours and a lot of time through the mail. Whereas now we can basically create that application in a digital format and collect the payment at the same time. And so that has led to a big increase for our clients and new members, which has been pretty cool. So
Now, why does moving to an online platform have the potential to increase union membership?
convenience and time. It's everybody has a phone. It's interesting. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you want to go on. The what a cyborg means, or like the upcoming cyborg revolution. That's a little further out, but they're basically arguing your phone's already part of your body, right? It's not actually, but if anyone's listening to this, it's like how far away from you are you from your phone at any given time, right? So we're basically all attached to our phones anyway. And if we can do things from our phone, why wouldn't we, right? So, and a lot of times I think there's a convenience gets confused with logic, right? I think sometimes things are convenient. If it's late at night and I'm feeling lazy and I order something from Uber Eats, sure, that's not necessarily logical. That's more convenience based purely, right? But if somebody's on their phone and they are thinking about joining a union and maybe they live, X number of miles away, or they're on the job and they don't have time to go and fill out a form, or they don't want to, logically it makes sense for them to go on their phone and do something that if it takes them 2-3 minutes, whereas it could take them 2-3 weeks through the mail or the other way, then that is a much more logical decision for them. And it just casts a wider net too, right? Where if people are just seeing the site or going online, they might be thinking about joining a union or an organization, come across the page and join before the people even know. And we've heard that before. They're just like, wow, having this as an option, it just reaches a larger audience without even knowing it, and then just also is much more appealing than something that takes several weeks versus 5-10 minutes.
Now, how do you overcome some of the reluctance people might have about using an online interface and having personal financial information online,
Yeah,
particularly
no,
with the older demographics that might have a lack of comfort putting
yep.
personal financial information online?
That's fair. And there's a certain group that I use my grandma for example. That she's just turned 87, and she won't use a cell phone. She won't use a computer. I mean, she barely uses checks or does anything, and that's fine. If that to me, if that's the group that says, "Hey, I won't use any of it," then all right. But it's pretty rare that you find that. And then also, there are certain degrees. I think people are more used to using Amazon or Facebook or the things that have become so ubiquitous that people forget that they are 1000% the internet, and they're asking for much more personal information than we are. And there's that, and there's also the fact that we built everything with PCI level 1 compliance in mind. None of the cardholder information is ever stored on our servers, on our client servers. Everything is subject to the highest level of encryption and tokenized vaulting. To get kind of nerdy on that if you want to, but it's all extremely secure. We never want to see any of that information. We never want our clients to have any of that information. So anything that is personal information or cardholder information is never actually stored.
And in terms of appeal to the younger demographics, does Unionly anticipate integrating cryptocurrency and crypto payments on the platform?
Yeah, that's always a big one. It's interesting. I myself am a pretty big fan of crypto, and interesting how it can all play in. It's something we've been asked. I think maybe down the road. I mean, to tie in with your original question, you know, part of why we got into this is to help kind of bring the overall organized labor space a little catch up to help them catch up a little bit with the 21st century. I think doing that right now might be a little bit too far ahead to offer that, but I think it's something we have entertained. I personally like the idea of creating our own currency that could then in some form be used to reward the members or the organizations that interact with the platform, because that's really where I think it could be pretty cool to actually create our own coin or currency. But within the traditional players, I could see it potentially coming through. Maybe not for the next, I don't know, call it year or two. But to me, the more appealing side of that would be to create our own kind of coin that members could benefit from holding, or even have some incentive by which they make transactions with to then give them more rewards. So that's something I think is pretty interesting. Obviously, a little bit more complex, but I think it could be more applicable and more helpful ultimately in the long run.
It would be interesting in terms of who would potentially invest in a token tied to
Hmm.
Unionly.
Yeah, yeah, and that to me where we're in a time where that's one obviously a thing, but two much more possible than before to actually do that, and it's all very public, and people could get in on, and it could be used because everything we're doing is around transactions, and it's kind of similar. Well, at least I'm thinking about it in the form of a rewards card. If you use this card at these places, you get X rewards. I think it could be similar to that fashion, where it could ultimately be beneficial for everyone. But that's just me thinking out loud, right? That's not something we have started working on, actively, but it's something that I would like to do. As far as the more traditional, kind of the main players in the crypto space, I think it's something that if we got enough demand or people really wanted to, we could look into. It's something that's definitely viable. So, yeah.
Now, how do you anticipate potential instances where unions get in the public eye, have membership that are accused of committing serious misconduct,
Hmm.
where there is an attempt to prevent the fundraising abilities of the union itself?
Hmm.
So, a few bad seeds or accused bad seeds
Hmm.
lead to an entire effort to deplatform specific unions. How will Unionly address calls to deplatform specific union groups?
Interesting. So you're talking about maybe organizations that are set up to break unions, or ones that are like individual people with that embezzle money?
Individual people that are just accused of serious
Okay.
misconduct that could be financial or assault allegations or
Okay.
the comments that they say online, and
Okay.
then not necessarily get doxxed, but
Uh,
the person gets tied to the labor union. People do some additional research, find out that the union is doing fundraising on your platform, and then is a whole swarm of people on social media saying that why is this group able to have an online store on your website?
Hmm. Okay, so I guess I view that as a few different things. So one, if I think the more common one you see is that insert union person X that misappropriates funds, right? That's the more common, I guess, which happens within any organization. Seems like anymore, and within that, it's a big argument that we've made and talked to people is that happens because there's no accounting. It's all if you're using paper cash and paper checks, then it's a lot harder to keep track of all that, or a lot easier to not keep track of that, right? If that's your goal. So that's one thing within the platform is everything that goes through the platform is 100% easily accountable. There's full financial reporting at all times, right? And so that's one way to kind of prevent that is, and one of the big cases for going away from using paper money, right? Because it's still cash, right? It's not you see a lot of everything say cashless. All stadiums are going cashless, and I wish we were all going cashless because then we wouldn't have to pay for it, right? It's just changing the medium by which it's being delivered, right? If I Venmo you $20 or I hand you $20 bill, it's the same thing. It's just not using paper, right? So we're not going cashless; we're going paperless. As far as if people have a problem with a union doing something or raising money for something, that would I guess it'd have to I'd have to see what the cause was for. If it was for something you know inappropriate, or we probably wouldn't let them do it, right? I mean, we kind of go through and vet everything that's being set up on the platform as far as fundraising goes. So, I mean, I guess I could think of a handful of things that if people really said, "Hey, we're raising money to do certain things," then we would shut it down. But do you mean kind of like if it was like a legitimate fundraiser, but they just don't like the concept of that union raising money in general?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, let's say a labor union tied to police officers,
Yep.
and there's a specific incident with uh, officers and accusations of overzealousness
Mhm.
in terms of
Right.
handling an accused perpetrator,
Mhm.
um,
Yep.
allegations of assault.
Right.
How would that be approached? Because there are a lot of calls for
Mhm.
in the social media sphere to
Right.
deplatform the fundraising abilities of union groups
Mhm.
tied to police officers.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's especially fun here in Seattle. I'm sure you heard. I grew up in Seattle, and we're located in Seattle, so we got some of the first cases of COVID were broken here, and then we obviously had the whole chop zone thing where part of the city was taken over, which was just ridiculous. So that was definitely a hot button issue here as well as around the country. I think that issue, there's a lot to it. I think if at a base level, if somebody is hurt or shot or injured and they want to raise money for their family, to me, that's they have their right to. That's just especially if someone gets killed, right? It's like, hey, if somebody in general loses their life and their family wants to raise, and people in the community want to raise money for them to support them going forward, hey, that's more power to you, right? Regardless of what kind of job you have or anything like that. So there's that. That conversation is pretty loaded to me personally. I like to stay pretty neutral, but I also like to look at things on extremes when I think through issues, right? Where it's like, okay, say we got rid of the police entirely, then what, we have 2 3 days left before society collapses. I don't know, maybe four, right? If so it's like, okay, but and then there are much bigger conversations around changing the budgets and all that. So I would hope to have, well, while it's not generally possible, but to have a logical and reasonable conversation with people But if they so chose to, you know, be the people that troll the comment sections, that then so be it.
Do you think that moving forward with respect to terms of service, that some language will have to be added, or do you think that approaching things on a case by case basis will be satisfactory enough for people that are interested in the Unionly platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you know, with it should always be open to adding new terms of service as you go and as you learn things. I mean, I think the big one we have in place is we reserve the right to, you know, take anything down or not approve or disapprove anything we, you know, feel is inflammatory or for any reason, right? So, you know, we haven't, you know, fortunately come across that scenario, but right now, basically, if somebody did want to create something that was you know, inappropriate, we could just take it down. Having said that, I think there's always room to improve disclaimers in terms of service moving forward. We should always be updating that. So
And the number of wage and salary workers belonging to unions was about 14.3 million in 2020, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is obviously a much smaller number than the number of folks in the workforce. After the 2018 Supreme Court decision that prohibited the collection of labor union fees from non union members in the public sector and all the various state laws that exist regarding labor unions,
mhm.
what is your view on the overall health of labor unions moving forward?
That's a great question. I think it's great. I think it's stronger than ever. Personally, maybe not as when it first started, but I think it's evolving, right? So you can cite the total numbers, but I think the way that I guess to start on that, you know, a big majority of jobs has moved into the tech sector, right? That's where you're seeing the overall number of public and private workers skewed, right? And so, and then tech companies have done a phenomenal job of keeping unions out, which is starting to change in some ways. You know, you're starting to see different kinds of unions form. You know, within the video game development industry, Starbucks is starting to unionize. They've had a couple drives. I mean, obviously Amazon's the big one that who knows where that will go, but I'd say overall, the what they look like they're changing, right? So I think there's more people that are becoming more aware of what a union can do. And then to me, as far as the do side of things, actually having a platform set up to control the finances is a way to avoid the conversation entirely, right? It's all around. You know, you have the Freedom Foundation that is steeped in, oh, you know, give people the right to choose, when in fact they're basically trying to break their ability to collect money to fund themselves so that they can take them down, right? And so to me, it's like, okay, you want to actually do something to give people the ability to choose. You have a platform that's set up where you say, hey, this is it. You go here, you make your payment, or you don't, right? You can pay your dues or not to actually fund the union. Because to me, it's that's really you give people the choice, and it's done that way. That's a big win. And then it's actually giving them control, right? So I think it's changing and shifting the way that you know, unions are being created. There's actually new ones created all the time now, which I think is pretty cool, which will continue to grow. I think, at least personally, and then their ability to fund themselves and give them control, I think, is huge. It's kind of crazy. I've talked to a few of my friends who own companies who are union friendly, and they told me about the cost to for them to process payroll deduction and how much that costs them and how much time that cost them. So I was just like, oh man, this is kind of crazy. Where, you know, if you were to actually take that and give that to the create, say, you set up a platform like ours and gave people the ability to pay that. I mean, if they were able to save all that money, how would that go back into the company? But it's interesting if, you know, the big case for it is, oh, it's super convenient, right? But it's like, okay, well, something is really convenient for one group, that means it's massively inconvenient for another. So to me, it's interesting one of thinking through that, kind of reframing that conversation. And it's not so much, hey, we're, you know, company X, we're not going to, uh, we're no longer going to collect dues via payroll deduction. Like, oh, it's bad. It's like, hey, we want to actually help transition to a platform that you can control it, so that you can do it whenever you want. You can stop it whenever you want. So to me, I think that's a pretty interesting way of kind of changing that conversation, because ultimately the goal is still to fund the organization. It's one, does somebody want to be part of something? a union, yes or no, and if so, how do they fund it, right? So that's my long answer to. I think the health is good, and there is some change that could be put into place to give people true control.
Now, how might the last 2 years with the pandemic altered perceptions of the value and importance of union membership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people who are part of private companies who just got laid off in mass. I mean, that's a big question, right? For me, I was part of a company that got acquired, and that was by a private company, and they said, "Hey, you're all laid off," and we said, "All right," nothing to do about it. So, to me, and we all thought him, it would be beneficial to have something we could do about this. That's kind of one instance. I'm sure there are some others that feel that way about it. I think there's so many groups because everybody was affected by it that I'd say that overall awareness has increased tremendously. And obviously, with Biden in place, who's been more pro union than ever, that's increasing awareness. So I think, to my estimation, throughout the pandemic, people have, if nothing else, have become much more aware of what a union can do for them or why they exist.
Now, there are no plans for Unionly to engage in outreach to inform people about the value of labor unions. It's not taking that active of a step.
Correct. Correct. Right now, we're more focused on working with individual organizations to really strengthen their membership and help them, grow and thrive. In the future, that could be something we look into to potentially get the word out. But to me, it's more how can we really complement what organizations are doing, since I think they know it best and they can do it best. But really, it's how can we kind of help strengthen them and their mission by helping bring their technology stack up to the 21st century.
And the reason why I ask it because we see so many companies coming up that label people as independent contractors, Uber,
Hmm.
Lyft, DoorDash, what have you.
Hmm.
And given that the people who do perform tasks on those platforms are comfortable with technology,
Hmm.
you would think potentially for the future, Unionly can engage with those folks since they are comfortable with using digital technology
Yeah,
to exchange information and details.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And that you bring up a good point there with all the gig economy being what it is and the potential shift there, and kind of that's something we're obviously keeping an eye on, and it's an idea that's interesting. I think we obviously want to, if we were to get into that kind of space, would be very tactful, and it would be in conjunction or coordination with some of the major internationals, if that's something that they wanted us to do with them. But for now, it's not something we plan on doing ourselves, right? So, but if it was in conjunction with, a larger organization or an international, then if it benefited them overall, then I could see us doing that. But for now, it's not in the cards.
And the Bureau of Labor Statistics also reported recently that African American or Black workers had the highest union membership rate of the major racial and ethnic group categories measured by the Bureau of Labor Stats, while Latinos had the lowest. And why do you think this potential gap exists? And does Unionly address the potential language barriers when communicating information on the platform? Is it multilingual?
Yeah, the platform can be translated, right? We've made it so that uh, any phone or any device can use the translate button, right? It'll always pop up. Do we have different versions? Everything is in English. We don't have different versions right now, but we have built-in items that can make it so it's translatable on that person's phone. And with technology the way it is, and the phones being built the way they are now, if that is something that people have or want to do, it can just be translated wholesale. All that being said, we do not have different versions of it built in different languages, but it can be translated easily if anybody wants to. On the racial side of things, I don't know if I'm one that can speak to that as a pretty standard 36-year-old white dude from Seattle. I don't know if I'm I'm able to speak on that nationally. But that's pretty cool to hear that those numbers are trending towards that.
And you worked on the concept of Unionly for over 3 years, as you mentioned. What were some of the major obstacles or logistical hurdles to getting the platform off the ground? I mean, you did speak to pitching the idea and it
Mhm.
not being received necessarily in the way that you would have hoped. But other than that, what were some of the other aspects that came about that made Unionly getting off the ground a bit tough?
Yeah, no. So I mean, I think one, the price point that we're doing it at is so painfully low. I think is why a lot of my former colleagues didn't like the idea. Right. To me, everything we put into it is to put our money where our mouth is, and we've made it about as close to break even as possible because we want as many people to use it as possible to help as many people as possible. So I think there's that side. I think one thing that has kept Union strong is also kind of led to them being further behind the technology, and that's being very insular and not trusting of outside companies, which is completely fair in general. It's like, hey, I call someone who's never met me. Why should they trust me? That's completely fair, right? Especially when you're talking about money, right? So I think kind of getting that off, getting building that trust was the hardest part, right? Of saying, we got a few clients and it's like, hey, trust me, and then they trusted us, and then that snowball effect has kind of happened where they're like, oh, you're for real, and you mean what you say, and you've delivered on what you said you would. So I think that has been a challenge, right? Anytime a new company comes into the market, especially one like the organized labor space that has been very insular as a whole, and saying, hey, especially with their money, to basically saying, hey, trust us with this. But that has started to kind of get better as we've delivered and worked with more clients. Kind of word of mouth has gone around. But I'd say building trust was one of the biggest uh, challenges to overcome.
Now, having been terminated from your prior job and you had this concept in your mind, did that experience motivate you to see this through? What was it that made you persevere given the extended period of time to get this platform live?
Yeah, no, it did. Like I said earlier, I felt sorry for myself for about 10, maybe 15 minutes as, the human experience wants to go through. And then I got pretty fired up, and kind of I've always joked to people kind of, hey, it's always good to have a chip on your shoulder. Not so much that you're like mad about something in general, but, meaning to have that kind of drive, right? To say, all right, let's keep going, right? Keep pushing. So yeah, it got me pretty fired up to say, okay, let's. And we'd been working on it, so I said, hey, why not, right? So, um, you know, with especially with the state of the world, it's like, hey, everything's shut down, everything, is not going. I could, talked to some of my friends. It's like, well, we could go interview at places for 6 to 12 months and not get hired and just kind of sit around, or we could do something about it and give it a shot. So, to me, that's where a lot of people were like, "Wow, you're really going to start this in the beginning of a once in a century pandemic?" It's like, well, yeah, no better time than the present. So, yeah, it got me pretty fired up, and especially just knowing that with the goal of actually helping people who the working class of America and people who are really asking for a lot, that got me pretty fired up too. When I used to work at Ava, which was a great company, people would say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'd say, "Oh, I help attorneys make more money." And they're like, "Oh, geez, oh my god." It's like, yeah, real noble, right? Uh, but then you got into higher ed, and they can all they're doing fine on their own. But really, this is helping a group of people that really help everybody else and help the country run. So that got me pretty fired up too.
Do you think the response from other people about your work at Avo maybe influenced you in a way to focus on unions?
Yeah, that was part of it, right? I mean, that was kind of a part of what led me to go work at Snap Advance, which was formerly Amplo, then Snap Advance. That's what kind of drove me to that, which was like, okay, this is supporting education and it's philanthropic, and so I think it kind of pushed me to that. And then as I, kind of learned that space and kind of saw that, I was like, all right, that's all good and well, but it just kind of was like, all right. And this opportunity was presented to me, and it was just like, hey, this is a group of people that if I can help, then why not? That sounds even better. So yeah, it's that's how we got here.
And you talked about the astronomical growth of both Avo and Snap Advance. Do you think that when a company you are working with grows significantly, yes, it is having success, but the excitement and spark that originally drove you to be passionate about the work, does it dissipate after a while? Or what is it about working at a company that's fairly small or at the ground up that inspires you or sparks your interest?
Yeah, being able to make decisions and act quickly, right? And that kind of us against the world mentality, I think, also drives a lot of creative thinking. And there's the pretty standard, oh, you fail fast and change rapidly and all that stuff, which is true, right? But to me, it's like with a smaller group that's really just kind of yeah, creating as you're going. There's that excitement of you are creating as you're going, and you get to be heard and think quickly and try things out. If they don't work, then you adjust, right? Versus if you go to work at a big conglomerate, which is major corporation, awesome, no problem. But for me personally, that was never really in the cards. I don't think. Not that I always like to oppose things, but I like to question things and ask the question why sometimes. And is there a better way of thinking about it, or just would you mind telling me the justification behind that, or and that is generally not welcomed in larger corporate settings, I think. And to me, there's that excitement of being able to work with a smaller team and act quickly and think on ideas. And if you if and but it's crucial within that structure to be brutally honest with each other. If you try something that didn't work, you say, "Hey, it didn't work. Cool. Let's try something else." Right. So to me, that's exciting, right? Where you get to try new things and really think about what's best for the market you're serving, for the people you're working with, and everything you're doing. So yeah, I think it's pretty exciting.
Now, for a lot of folks, though, the potential uncertainty and fear of failure is enough to prevent them from making that transition.
Uh-huh.
So, what advice do you have for someone that does have an entrepreneurial mindset that is a bit fearful of the uncertain and can get potentially discouraged with some of the roadblocks that come about in seeing an idea come to fruition?
Yeah, I would encourage them to focus on what their concept of fear is, and to really embrace fear. Right. I actually years ago I went to it was like a work health and wellness fair thing, and my cousin's then boyfriend at the time's dad was a workplace psychologist, and he said, "Hey Scott, can we go through something real quick? I'm actually glad you asked this." I said, "Sure." He said, "What's your concept of fear?" I was like, "Concept of fear?" I was like, "Well, I'm afraid of this or that." He goes, "No, no, what's your concept?" I was like, "All right, man, what are you talking about?" He said, "All right, close your eyes and picture that which causes you fear or you're afraid of the most, right?" And I said, "Okay." He said, "Now make that as big as you can, like make that your like fill up your entire being and say like this is how I feel like fear." And I said, "Okay." I went through it, and he said, "Okay." He said, "Now you can grasp that fear is an emotion." He goes, "It's fight or flight. And we manifest it into things that we are afraid of." He said, "Fear is just an emotion like anything else." And I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." So, I mean, obviously, it takes practice, and there's to kind of segue on that. Simon Sinek, who's maybe one of the best speakers out there. He does a piece on never be nervous again, and it's nervous and excited. He basically talks about, okay, what happens when you get nervous? Your heart rate goes up, you start to sweat, and all that. What happens when you get excited? You start to sweat, your heart rate goes up. And so he said they're the same thing. It's how you interpret the stimulus, right? How you interpret the response. Sure, it's a choice and all that, but to me, anything you're afraid of realizing it's an emotion, and just saying, hey, this is something I want to give a shot. So it's also built into our DNA as humans, right? Fight or flight. It's innate to our being that you're going to experience that. So I think the better are more prepared you are when that happens, the better off you'll be in willing to take a chance. So it's all pretty, I guess, common stuff there, but it's really just thinking and acknowledging what your concept of fear is and realizing that it's an emotion that can be used to your advantage.
And with the platform and the rollout, what has surprised you so far? I mean, for example, have there been particular fundraising ideas that you didn't expect to be as successful, and you come across the analytics and you say, "Oh, well, this particular union was quite successful doing this particular event." What are some things that you've come across in your experiences interacting with all these union groups that has stood out to you or surprised you in any way?
Yeah, no, I think the different kinds of applications and payments combined has really surprised me. The just different kinds of organizations that have used it for, through electrical training centers, IBWs, fraternal order police, firefighters, sheet metal workers, you name it, that have gone and created the different forms of digital applications that they need to have for either courses. There's also been a big use of the store for online course fees, for just different registration or different gear. So that's been pretty surprising to me in some cases where it's actually been used for official gear, where it's like actual like people that need the, hard hats and different, license tabs and just different things that they need for their job. That's been pretty surprising to, didn't think we'd be getting into this to be the actual help people buy the merchandise they need for their, or the items they need to do their jobs. So that's been kind of cool to see. The different events that people, that clients have used the platform to have registrations for has been pretty cool too. I'm a big fan of bringing people together. So there's your standard, golf tournaments or dinners, but just to see the different events that people have set up or to have registrations for has been really cool. And then just the whenever we have fundraisers, we'll add, if it's for a person in need or a member in need, we'll put message to family or note to family, and to just see we can just see the count of how many of those are actually filled out. And it's always cool to see the overwhelming, response where it's not just somebody donating money, it's somebody, with a message to the family or, really just the engagement on that front. But yeah, the different kinds of applications and the way that the online store has been used for different kinds of merchandise and courses and classes and official gear has been pretty cool to see.
And given that we are still in a sort of socially distanced era, have there been a lot of events that have been on a platform like Zoom that have been purely online?
Yeah, we had a big conference. It was the EWMC conference. It's the Electrical Workers Minority Caucus. Excuse me. The last 2 years was virtual. Did that. Helped the Philadelphia CLU, which is the Coalition of Labor Union Women. They had their event virtually. So yeah, there've been some cool ones to see there, where they have virtually, and then there's been a few others where it's been kind of hybrid, where it's virtual and in person. But then obviously the last, especially this past summer when everyone thought the pandemic was over, that what like 1 to 2 month window we had, where it was like, all right, everybody, go back. And we had a bunch of events then, which is cool to see. But yeah, the different conferences, which was cool to see just how many more people were able to participate. Right. I mean, obviously, it's always good to have in-person events when you can, but just one, it allowed for the cost to be reduced and more people could attend, right? So that was pretty cool to see on that front.
Now, other than the digital currency component for the future of Unionly, what do you see on the roadmap?
Yeah, so the big one is automation, right? Of basically, you could have your whole member database. It could basically sync up with how much they owe on the dues front, at least, of saying, okay, this person owes X at Y interval, and it could just send out those reminders and then basically manage the entire process, both on the communication side, the payment collection side, and the reporting side. Because a lot of times the person who's doing all that is either a volunteer or wears many hats, right? So it's and a lot of times too with the check process, and people like to say, "I want to send in checks," or send in cash. That will get lost in the mail, or it will delay their ability to actually become a member, or it takes that one person all of their time. So I think automating that whole process will be big. I think there's the application side and tying that together as well. Basically, from the new member application all the way through to the due side, and then tying in any potential donations or event registration to really build kind of the whole picture of the union member journey, if you will, to really help increase engagement and activate membership. Those are big that are on the horizon. To really just take all of the processes they're currently doing and making it automated with their help so they can control it. They still have access to it, everything. It just really will save everybody involved an absurd amount of time as well as money. So that's kind of the big picture moving forward.
Do you anticipate having potential partnerships with vendors that create the merchandise for the online store on behalf of the union groups?
Yeah, yeah, that'd be. I could see that. We obviously it'd have to be union made in the U.S., which is harder than otherwise, right? But I'm definitely open to it. So um, yeah,
And just in terms of people interested in getting in business and starting a new platform, how do you maintain a work-life balance?
yeah. I mean, that's up. I think that's up to the individual, right? I, you know, I,
but
that's
but
what I
I
kind of
think it
laugh.
is helpful to hear from someone
Yeah,
who's actually done it.
yeah. I mean, one, it's like define work life balance, and two, maybe define for me personally. I like to work a lot, or it's when it's your own. I think that there will not be as much of one as you're used to, right? I think that's just if we're being honest. I think starting out, it's kind of I joke to people. They'll say, "Oh, do you have this day or that day off?" And I say, "You know what? I have every day off, and I don't have every day off." Where it's work life balance. I think um, it's tough. I think obviously there's times where you have to you know do the things you need to be with your family and take breaks here and there. But and especially with different things that have come up. I mean, there's been times where I've worked till 3, 4 in the morning, or gotten calls at midnight saying, "Hey, this person was injured or killed. Can you help me out?" Or so there's different times where it's like, all right, if I need to help, then I will. But I think, like I said, that's ultimately up to the person and how they define it. And just being aware of creating something that ultimately can be run more streamlined and kind of on its own. But that's always a tough question. It's one I think it's define it, and then two, really what that means to you is the way to kind of not to deflect, but I think that's beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right?
And we did talk about fear, but
Mhm.
is there a fear of burnout? Because I mean, if you are intensely involved with something
Oh
and you're
yeah,
incredibly passionate about
oh
it,
yeah,
oh, in due time, there could be a point where
oh
you're
yeah,
you're just totally
absolutely.
fed up.
Absolutely. I think that's always possible, right? It's that's something to always be aware of, right? But I mean, for me, that's talking about if people are thinking about starting their own deal or whatnot. That to me has been one of the biggest changes. Is when you're working for yourself, there's a lot more of a drive to get past that burnout, right? Where it's for you and not for somebody else, right? So, but yeah, it's very possible that you'll hit that point, and I've been there before, and you take a day or two, and you get back to it. So, yeah, it does require a certain level of drive, and um, you know, uh, to keep going. But it's rewarding in the end. And I think you find a new level of dedication and energy when it's for yourself and the people that you're looking out for versus somebody else. So that's my take on it.
Now, is there anything that we haven't talked about regarding Union Lane that you would like to convey to the Great A Nation audience?
Yeah, I mean, really, with everything we've set up, it's we've taken everything and it can be all set up in about 10 to 15 minutes. We have an option that is completely free. Really, our cost, if at most, would be $250 a year, or $0 a year, and then it's very easy to set up. We have unlimited use. We've also made it so that all of our terms, there's no long-term commitment. We openly state we do not sell or profit off of or share any data or information. Basically, it's all like counter intuitive to most business practices, where it's basically me saying, "Hey, this is what we believe in, and we want to prove it." So just give us a shot, and put your trust in us, and we'll make it worth it.
Yeah, I encourage folks to learn more at the website unionly.io. Scott Heric, thank you very much for your time and Great A Nation. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.